I wrote you a note in which I explained a dark night of the soul experience that I'd had a number of years ago, in which really culminated in a catastrophic breakdown of sorts for me, maybe sort of similar to what I read in your book, The Power of Now. And during that, there was a cathartic release. I was in the fetal position on the floor crying, frankly, and there was a utter and complete surrender. This is sort of a humbling story. After that happened, I was sitting in an empty room in a chair, and there was this unbelievable post-cathartic stillness that took over me, and there was complete silence. And then the strangest thing started happening. I began witnessing my thoughts. And as I witnessed my thoughts, I had this unbelievably simple awareness that if I'm witnessing my thoughts, what am I? And that completely changed my life. I can't even begin to tell you what happened after that awareness happened. And then one thing led to another, and then there was a point where I started realizing that what I am, I couldn't find a boundary for. Okay? And so I was sort of interested because in your book you talked about this in the Power of Now, about the dark night of the soul experience, but I'm sort of wondering about your journey from there through the process of realizing that this awareness that I am is not personal. It's intimate, but it's not personal. And that seems to be the toughest part of it all to really get a handle on. So if you could walk me through that, I'd appreciate it.
It seems that I will comment, but the most important thing I think is it seems that what your mind is trying to do is to understand awareness, and you can't really. The mind can't. So you cannot really come to a satisfying conclusion about the nature of awareness. It's only awareness itself, really. In awareness, awareness is known, but awareness as an object for thought is not it. And that's why the Tao Te Ching starts with the line, the Tao that can be spoken of is not the true Tao. So all that language can do is use pointers to point you in the direction of awareness, or language can point out the obstacles, the likely or possible obstacles in yourself to the state of awareness. So that these two kinds of pointers, one is the pointers to the moon, awareness being the moon. So the words, there's only this moment, and so on, it all points to the same. Whatever I talk about is really, they're all pointers. They're either pointers towards awareness, or they are pointers that look at the obstacles that may arise in yourself, in a human being, so that you recognize them when they happen, so that the obstacles in the form of certain mind patterns don't take you over and obscure the arising awareness. But once awareness has arisen, the mind is not useful anymore, and you don't need further pointers in order to. The mind will continue wanting to understand a bit more about awareness, but really this is where conceptual understanding comes to an end. And I can call awareness personal, and I can call it impersonal. It's not personal in the usual sense. Everybody has a certain sense of, I'll just say a few words about it, but we're not trying to understand awareness. We can't. Everybody has a sense of I-ness, of identity. Everybody has this sense of him or herself as a, hard to describe, the sense of I. Now, usually the sense of I is mixed up with certain mind movements, thought patterns, which you could also call stories. they thought patterns that hang together as a story. And so your sense of I gets mixed up with a story, thoughts in your mind, and that is called the personal sense of self. But the story really is nothing. They're just thought forms, temporary thought forms. The real sense of I is the awareness inside the thought forms, without which the thought forms could not even be there. So the true sense of I is the awareness that got mixed up with the story or the thoughts. So most people have a sense of identity that is of that mixed kind, where consciousness or awareness has become entangled in thinking. And then people only know themselves through thinking. They believe they are what their mind tells them they are, and their memories and so on. And that's called the personal sense of self. But even there, the substance behind it and in it is the consciousness. It's not the story. That's where the sense of the preciousness that everybody feels that I am, and where the mind says, I don't want to lose that. I don't want to die. This is what people are scared of. They might lose themselves. They might lose that preciousness. Everybody deep down feels that preciousness inside. Even people who are unhappy, they're still here. They haven't jumped off the bridge yet. They feel a preciousness still inside, hiding somewhere. And that preciousness is consciousness itself. It's not your story. Now, that consciousness is not personal. It really only becomes personal when it gets mixed up with memories and a story, or expectations and memories. So if you what happened to you then was the disentanglement happened spontaneously, and so there was the realization of that which is there when consciousness is no longer entangled in form, because the consciousness is the formless, it's the unconditioned consciousness. So that is called then self-realization in some traditions, or it's called awakening in other traditions, whatever you call it. That's the realization of the formless essence of who you are. And so the mind, of course, continues, but there's no longer investment in it. Some consciousness still flows into mind activity, but the important thing is there is no longer a self in the mind activity. And so, because the self is realized as essentially formless and timeless. So that's a beautiful thing. Now, the fact that mind activity still continues means that occasionally the mind is wondering about consciousness and awareness. And so the mind needs to then see that it is futile, and since there's no self in it anymore, it won't be too difficult. The mind just needs to be told that it cannot. You cannot come to any kind of satisfying or satisfactory conclusion about the nature of awareness or further conceptual understanding of what awareness is all about. The mind would like that. But there is a vastness in awareness, and awareness begins to operate through your mind without needing your mind to understand more about it, because that's what the mind always says, I need to understand more. You can understand a lot more about the things of this world. There's many things that you can still study, everybody can. There are many books you can still read, things you can still learn. There's always the possibility of acquiring more in this world. It's fine, nothing wrong with that. But as far as self-realization is concerned, there's no more. There may be a deepening, or the aware state may express itself more and more fully through your mind. Your mind may have your mind becoming the servant of awareness can take that adjustment from a self-serving mind to becoming aligned with the aware state may take a while. I'm speaking from my own experience. Not that I ever could explain awareness, you can't explain emptiness, but the ability to say things, to give pointers to other people, the ability to understand even what had happened to me when the shift happened, that took several years to understand. For example, to understand that my mind activity had become reduced after the shift by perhaps 80%. In other words, I was spending long stretches to talk from the external point of view of time. I was spending long stretches in the timeless paradox here, because you have the outer and the inner. And this was the reason why I felt so peaceful. But I didn't know that my mind wasn't saying much anymore, because it wasn't saying, I'm not saying much. And all I knew was there was a deep sense of peace and aliveness. And I was looking through, perceiving things through the sense of peace and aliveness, so that even the traffic became peaceful. And there was nothing wrong with the traffic. And there was, or whatever, and things that before I had resented, having to live I had little money, so living in a little room, which in England is called a bedsitter, where you have a little stove in a corner, and then you have your bed, and you have a seating area, and then you share the bathroom with, I think, 8 or 9 people in different rooms. And so before I didn't like where I was, and suddenly it was great. It was fine, because there was this beautiful light shining through the window. The little objects on the table were full of aliveness, and even waiting for the bathroom wasn't that problematic anymore, except occasionally I developed constipation because of the waiting. But that in itself wasn't a problem either. It was the same or I had complained about having to go by tube or underground, which is the subway in London. It can be very unpleasant at times. And again, there were blissful states traveling in the subway, waiting for the train. Wow! But it wasn't in the world of form. It was the form was perceived through the awareness, but understanding very little. All I could have said, suddenly I'm so peaceful, I don't know what happened. That was all. That was my limit for 2 years approximately. That was the limit of my understanding. And so that's how it is. So what does take then perhaps time from our external viewpoint is the alignment of your mind with the aware state, and then gradually it can flow into the mind structures, and you can speak about opening yourself up to awareness, and many other things. Pointers will arise that may be helpful for others. You may write a book, but not too soon. It's often the case that people write books too soon. So just let it mature, and the one thing that you won't get much further in is a conceptual understanding of awareness itself. And that's the answer.
Yeah.
Is religion necessary if only presence matters? Is there a place for going to church and following in the steps of Jesus if only presence is important? The question is specifically about focusing on Christian religion, but the answer, I suppose, I don't know what the answer is going to be, but it's going to be probably also refer to other religions. Religions in general. Is religion necessary? It depends who you are on the level of the form. For some people, it can be necessary or helpful for 2 reasons. It can provide the more superficial reason. It can give your life a certain amount of structure, which for some people can be helpful. Regular practice gives you a feeling of comfort. some people have too little structure in their lives, and others have too much already. More importantly, on another level, religion can either obscure the spiritual dimension within yourself, and often it does, or if used rightly, if approached rightly, if understood on a deeper level, it can help you access and stay in connectedness with that deeper level of yourself or the transcendent dimension of consciousness. Whether or not you need it, only you can know. Whether you find it either helpful or a hindrance, it can be either, depends on you as a person, your past, what function it had in your past, and so on. It is a hindrance if religion becomes an ideology. Then it operates only on the level of the mind and is very similar to any other kind of ideology that you may believe in, whether it's communism as an ideology or any political theory or anything that explains the universe. It could be a metaphysical system that you completely believe in, philosophical system, and so on. So an ideology is something that takes possession of your mind and exerts a controlling function, and it can influence almost your entire mental functioning if it becomes something of overwhelming power in your mind. It's a little thought that grows into a huge thing in your mind, and the tentacles reach into every aspect of your mind, and there are religious people like that. Usually you can recognize that it is an ideology by the fact that they are not peaceful human beings and by the fact that they have enemies, either even within their own religion or another religion. Anybody who does not agree with their ideology becomes an enemy. In the same way, people who were not nowadays that many were deeply believing in communism, which was a wonderful idea to start with, of course. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. It was a beautiful idea of equality. Everybody the same. That is wonderful. No personal possessions. Sounds wonderful too. And the only mistake was it was imposed from outside by people who themselves has not gone beyond the egoic state of consciousness. They just played it in their mind as, that's a good idea. And then it was imposed on other people who also were not in that state of consciousness. But most importantly, those who imposed the idea on others forced them to live it out. The ideal became contaminated with ego. So when these people came to power, their egos became inflated to an enormous degree, almost to absurdity, and without realizing it, they reenacted the same evils, in some cases worse than those that they were fighting against. Like in Russia, they saw the injustices associated with the Tsar regime and so on, and they truly saw that. They truly wanted to remove that, and that seemed a good thing. But they had overlooked their own state of consciousness. And the great challenge is for people, power. You can have that very meek person who seems, oh, this is what a lovely person. He seems to have no ego, or very little. He's so give that person power, then the latent ego, which is there let's say a person is very poor, has no power at all, give that poor person power, then the latent ego will no longer be latent, it will suddenly come to life. And that is repeated and has been repeated many, many times in countries where frequently the government is overthrown and then the previous rulers are accused of corruption. And the new people who overthrow the previous, they truly believe that now they have a more just society is going to arrive, because they don't know themselves, they have not observed themselves, and the moment they achieve power, they are seduced by that, and their ego suddenly grows, and they reenact the same thing again. So ideology, religion can turn into, and often does turn into, ideology. You can recognize it, as I said, by the fact that these people are not peaceful. They will condemn other people or other groups of people as evil. They may verbally, even physically, attack others. And if it's not that extreme, it might be that they simply are extremely intolerant towards anybody who does not share their belief system, their ideology. And so that's a clear sign that that kind of religion is a hindrance to the spiritual dimension, to knowing who you are, to being a peaceful human being. It's in the service of the ego. It's an egoic creation. The ego can take scriptures that are beautiful and point to the truth and can corrupt them, completely misread and misinterpret them, and then they're used in the service of the ego. So that's how religion can become a huge hindrance. But religion can also become an opening into the spiritual dimension. So a religious practice or a religious reading, a reading of a sacred text, an ancient spiritual text, can be a wonderful thing. The questioner mentions Jesus. Following in the steps of Jesus, is that, or is only presence important? When you use it in a deeper sense, following in the steps of Jesus means becoming present. How? First of all, Jesus taught presence in quite a few of his utterances, starting from the flower, that you said you should really look at the flower and see how it lives in the present moment without worry and anxiety. He taught egolessness, deny thyself, which means recognize the unreality of yourself. He spoke of the I am as the foundation, and which is misinterpreted. We have, let's just for a moment in Christianity, we have a historical person, probably, Jesus, and we have Christ. Now Christ was not his actual name, it was a title given later, and that's already mentioned in the more enlightened parts of the New Testament, that Christ is a dimension of consciousness. And I believe it's St. Paul who says, I must diminish and Christ in me must grow. This is a mystical, deeper interpretation of Jesus, who was an historical person who realized his kinship with the transcendent dimension, the divine, whatever you want to call it. He realized his connectedness, his kinship, his oneness with that. And as he realized that, he became, the transcendent dimension emerged in him, as it does in you. It emerged in him, and then the historical person, Jesus, became the Christ. Therefore, we have in mystical Christianity the term Christ consciousness, which is the transcendent consciousness that emerges where before there was only the person. And we have in certain Buddhist traditions the term Buddha nature, that says that every human being and everything that's alive has at the core of their being is Buddha nature, or the Buddha as the reality of who you are. That's the teaching in some Buddhist traditions. And it's a beautiful teaching that your true nature is Buddha nature. And you just have to realize your true nature is Buddha nature. Isn't that what we've been talking about? It's just a different name attached to it. In mystical Christianity, it's Christ consciousness. And so Jesus was a precursor who showed the way to Christ consciousness. And if we're focusing on the historical figure of Jesus and realizing that he embodies both the person and the Christ, can become a vehicle for you, if that is suitable for you. And if you still feel drawn to Christianity or any or other religion, that is the way for you to go deepen that, rather than think you have to move into something else. But if that doesn't work for you, then fine. Then walk away and find Christ consciousness somewhere else. And some people don't need any religious structure anymore. This is for the first time, perhaps, in the evolution of humanity, there's spirituality that exists outside of formalized religions. And that's an amazing thing. So many of you may not need the formalized religion anymore, and others may need it, and that is a beautiful thing. You can deepen the way in which you live, practice, and understand your religion so that it becomes an opening into the transcendent dimension within yourself. If you are a Christian and want to deepen certain readings, I would highly recommend. There were certain teachers who expressed the truth of Christianity from a deeper level than the conventional church Christianity. The most in the past, Meister Eckhart, who lived in the early Middle Ages. The most wonderful, his writings are superb and fantastic depth to them, and he uses Christianity to take you very, very deep into the core of it all, the core of all things, into yourself. Other mystical writers in the Middle Ages are good too, some Spanish ones, some more German ones. And more recently, I would recommend Course in Miracles, which uses Christian terminology throughout, which to some people is obnoxious, can't stand it. And others say, wow, now I understand it in Christianity much better. And Joel Goldsmith, he was a teacher in the 50s and 60s, also reinterprets Christianity and makes it deeper, discovers the depth dimension that's there. And other religions have the same. You have deep teachings in Judaism, you have deep teachings in Islam, you have deep teachings, obviously, in Buddhism. So there's the superficial level to religion, and if that's all there is for you, it will probably become an ideology, and then it becomes a barrier. Or, if understood more deeply, it can become an opening. This mind-made sense of self is also much more focused on the negative than the positive. To be free, you awaken to who you are beyond your history, and your life situation.
Hello. I would like to ask about physical pain. Your expression of ease of being, it really speaks to me, and relaxed awareness. But I feel something that always pushes me out of that is the physical pain I find inside. Which is too much most of the time.
What do you experience? What kind of physical pain are you experiencing?
Stomach pain, the bowels.
Yeah,
and a lot of the time, just my whole body.
Your whole body aches.
Yes. And while I'm here, there is an immense inner body feeling. It's like Eckhart says, having the socket just put in.
Mm-hmm. Is that painful?
It's so intense that it's sometimes too much, but I can still rest in it. But then the physical pain is so strong at the same time.
Are you in pain right now in this moment?
When I'm speaking a little bit, when I'm sitting down, it's much more. I've tried to shake it out. It seems to help a little bit, but I wonder, are there things I can do? Or just being with it, I see there is a lot of resistance too. And then watching the resistance makes the resistance just stronger. I stiffen up. And
you stiffen up when the pain happens, you mean?
No, the pain is there before, but trying to watch the pain makes it worse. And
watching the pain makes it worse.
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yeah, and the tensing up of the whole body gets worse. And
because you don't want to feel it, right?
Yeah, there remains.
You want it gone, right?
I want it to be over. I'm aware of that, but I just can't avoid the thought of wanting to be away. It's just a circle, and the whole body goes into a stress reaction. And how to be with that? I mean, I know there is resistance. I see it, but I can't stop it either. It's
okay. So if you can't stop the resistance, can you accept resistance?
Sometimes, a split second.
Okay. No, can you stop resistance again? Accept it. I mean, if the resistance is there, then you got to accept resistance. If you can't surrender to the pain, surrender to the sensations. If we drop the label pain, see, immediately when we feel a sensation in our body and it's painful, our minds goes, pain, no, I don't want it. And then we contract more. And then the pain is even greater. If we let go of the label pain and just accept and feel the sensation, because all it is, it's sensation. The moment we label it, it's almost like we make it a solid form, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? It's like when you are looking at some flowers and you go, that's a rose. Well, it isn't a rose. It's a concept, rose. It's a name. We call it rose, but it's not a rose. It's like we stop the flow, the natural flow and the connection of this beauty right here. So the pain that's happening inside of you And my guess is, you know, how our emotions are so connected to our body and our thoughts are so connected to our body. There's probably something in your conditioned self and habit forming of thoughts, maybe some negativity as well. And that accumulates. The energy stays stuck in the body and eventually does lead to pain, and maybe eventually it leads to some sort of illness. So what accepting means, you accept the present moment. You accept the form of the present moment as if it would last for eternity. That's accepting the sensation of pain, the pain that you have, or anything that you have. True acceptance means that you are willing to feel this emotion, this pain in your body forever.
Welcome to our live meditation. It's all about becoming still within, which means not to be engaged in the stream of thinking, the stream of thinking has a very strong pull for almost everybody. Because for most people, their entire sense of who they are, their sense of self, sense of identity, is bound up with their stream of thinking. The stream of thinking, which includes, of course, reactions, likes, dislikes, opinions, mental positions. A story, my story. It's all in the stream of thinking. Accompanied a lot by certain emotions that reflect whatever is going on at any given time in the mind, in the stream of thinking. So that is most people's, that is the basis for most people's sense of identity, the I sense, who I am, or think I am. The most amazing discovery you can make in this lifetime is the discovery that you don't have to think to be yourself. There's another dimension in you that has nothing to do with thinking, but out of which thinking arises. So it's perhaps not totally right to say it has nothing to do with thinking. Thinking arises out of it. Thinking could not exist without that dimension, but that dimension in itself is far beyond thinking, much deeper, vaster. And as I speak to you about this here and now, I suggest that you become aware of the gaps between words, because it is there that that dimension is known. You might notice the gap between words, the space between words, between sentences. That space is just that. It's space. It has no content. The words are the content within the space. And most people are never aware of the space, but only aware of the content. So here you become aware of the space within, which we can also call stillness. And you realize beyond any thoughts that there is a presence there. It is a presence. And if you can sense yourself, feel yourself, sense yourself as the presence with no particular attributes, not that underlying sense of beingness or presence is not old or young. It's not successful or a failure. These are all mental labels that you give yourself, or other people give yourself, and you accept them. Not young or old, not successful or unsuccessful. rich or poor, even man or woman. So it's nothing to do with that, it's deeper than that. Or the story, your life history, or your life situation right now, whatever your situation is in the realm of relationships, finances, work situation, living situation, health. They all make up who you are on the level of form. But they are not who you are on a deeper level. And at that deeper level, you are simply conscious presence. The desired outcome, if the desired outcome occupies a place in your mind that's overwhelming, or you desperately need to go to arrive at that place, then in the meantime, all the things that you do are then simply a means to an end. Perhaps we can start with a few, before we go on to questions, a few additional remarks about the important subject of being and doing. That's what we started with in the last session. And finding a balance. And before finding a balance, being able to enter, to access the being dimension. That's already a good start. And then at first, what tends to happen, but although not invariably, is you enter the being dimension or access it when you're in a place that is conducive to the stillness or the serenity, or here, a protected space, or perhaps at home in your room, or here in your room, out in nature. And at first, the being dimension is associated with cessation of doing. That's how you first realize it. It's when you're not doing anything and you can just be, consciously be. Which implies no matter how brief, a cessation of the primary doing, which is the thinking doing. Without no matter a brief cessation in the stream of thinking, it's hard to find the being dimension. But later on, as you become consciously rooted in the being dimension, thinking and being can come together. They are not irreconcilable, and in fact that is one of your tasks, is to, when you do think, not to be totally identified with the stream of thinking. In other words, there's some attention in the background, there's an awareness, a field of, or a space of awareness in the background, even while you're engaged in thinking. As it is now, as I'm speaking, of course the mind is operating, but I can sense, and perhaps you can, in the background, behind the words, beyond the words, in between the words, there's that space of stillness, beingness, whatever you want to call it. And if you can sense it, you might believe, if you sense it's coming from here, if you can sense it, it's in you. Because only being can be aware of being, not the mind. If you believe being emanates from me, I suppose it does, but at that moment there's the recognition of being can only happen through accessing that dimension within yourself. Only being can recognize being, not the mind. The mind, however, may come in when you, let's say, you recognize the being dimension that emanates from this thing, that's the body or whatever it is. It emanates, and you sense it. The moment you sense it, it's in you also, consciously. Now, it's possible that the mind may come in and misinterpret what's going on. And the mind may confuse the form of the spiritual teacher, whoever it happens to be, the form identity with the being dimension, and then suddenly the teacher is regarded as a supernatural being or a kind of godlike figure or some great guru or whatever, because you confuse that which transcends the form, for which the form is only an opening. You confuse that with the form, and then you make that person through whom being shines, you make that person very special. This can happen easily. It's a misinterpretation, but at least you recognized being. But what you overlooked is, because not everybody will recognize it in the being dimension in a human being. If it shines through strongly, not everybody will recognize. Some people say, what's this all about? Why are these people all listening to this guy for 2 hours? He's not special. He doesn't even jump up and down the stage, and he's just boring, isn't he? He's boring. So that's a danger. That is also a danger as far as the spiritual teacher is concerned, because there may be remnants of ego left in him or her, And if the teacher is bombarded with continuous projections of specialness, he or she may begin to believe, in other words, the ego comes back through the back door and regains ascendancy, and the ego comes back, and then the teacher begins to think, to feel a specialness in the person, the form. And then the teacher, it's happened many times, the teacher makes statements such as, I'm certainly the greatest teacher alive on the planet at the present moment. Or it may go so far as to say, I'm the greatest that has ever lived, all the others were precursors of I have arrived. There is something incredibly special coming through, but it is nobody's possession, it's nobody's achievement, it does not belong to the form dimension. But the form dimension can be an opening, just like a window. In a way, one could say, this body and this mind is the window frame. What you see is the window frame, but what the most important thing about the window is the light that comes through the window. That's the opening. And this may also happen to you when you, as presence arises, you will, if it's not happened already, for many of you probably has happened already, you come into contact with people who are helped by your presence. Even if you don't feel that you know what to do, because this doesn't work like that. They're helped, and they're drawn to you, they're helped by your presence. There's a kind of transmission. It can awaken the presence in the other, that dimension, the being dimension in the other. And then you can find they may then become attached to you because they feel so good in your presence and they can't let go. And again, the danger already arises then that you feel, I have done this. There's one could call that healing in a deeper sense, not just physical healing, but the true healing is to the reconnection with the being dimension. That's the true healing. And there's a phrase in this book called The Course in Miracles, which is, the healer does not heal, he lets healing be. He does not heal, he lets healing be. So when you are with people who are seeking help, then you don't need to go into your mind and say, how can I help this person? And just to go, the person is talking to you, and you already think, perhaps I could say that, I can say that. It doesn't work like that. You're just present. At some point, you may say something comes from a deeper place, or you may not even say anything, and there's just an answer may suddenly appear in the other person. It's suddenly, oh, and you never said or did anything, you just sat there. So at first, the being dimension, you find it as separate from external activity or thinking. And then that's a good beginning. And then gradually you learn that it is not irreconcilable with external activities. It's a presence through movement is a good practice, because it shows you do not need to sit still to find stillness, which is another word for it, which people believe initially. Stillness also has kind of two meanings in English. There's, on the one hand, stillness means the absence of noise, but there's another meaning of stillness is the absence of movement. And you say, sit still. It's the absence of movement. He stood still, he sat. So it's stillness points in English to the absence of either noise or movement. So when we talk about stillness, you might think you can't move in order to consciously sense the being dimension. You mustn't move. And then you learn you can actually move, and in fact it can be helpful. You begin with that. And then you can perform certain tasks and still be in that connectedness with being instead of completely losing yourself in the activity. You can have goals to pursue, which is in the realm of doing. It's good to have goals, although there may be periods in your life when you don't need any goals. Certainly if you reach a certain age, it becomes increasingly pointless to pursue goals, at least at the latest by the age of 95. You don't need to pursue any more goals unless for some reason you have to. But even before then, there may be time periods in your life when the pursuit of goals is not necessary, and you can become more deeply immersed, just be engaged in ordinary everyday activity without pursuing any particular big goal, big or small, working towards something. But on the whole, it's good to have goals, but again, goals belong to the realm of doing, and that's fine. The problem arises if the goal absorbs so much of your attention, the meaning, the desired outcome, the place you want to arrive at, whatever that may be, passing an exam, achieving a certain position, acquiring mastery in some activity, whatever it may be, the desired outcome. If the desired outcome occupies a place in your mind that's overwhelming, or you desperately need to arrive at that place, then in the meantime, all the things that you do, the steps you take, the activities you undertake in order to arrive at your goal, are then simply a means to an end. And they are not enjoyable because you desperately want to have arrived already. How can we measure our spiritual progress? Well, one thing I mentioned earlier when we gave the example of arriving here and being told that no, we have no reservation for you. Such situations are interesting situations that can reflect back to you what your level of consciousness is, how you react or respond in such a situation. And life is full of situations like that, when something happens and you're not being honored, or somebody hasn't respected you, or is not giving you enough attention, and something goes drastically wrong. And what does that do to you, and how does it affect you? That you can, through self-observation, You can sometimes the observation can only come in retrospectively. Sometimes in the moment you get so taken over by some reaction that you don't even know what's going on. You're just on automatic. It's the ego having taken over. Then sometimes after it has subsided, you look back on the situation and you observe your reaction and say, would have even better if somebody could have videoed you. That would be extremely helpful if you could arrange with a person close to you to pick up the iPhone and put it on video and film you when you're being unconscious. And then when you're more conscious, ask you, are you ready to look at yourself? But for the deepest answer to how can we measure our progress on the spiritual path, I would like to refer you to the answer given by Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi when he was asked the same question sometime in the 1950s. How can we measure progress, our progress on the spiritual path? And his answer, and that is the answer at the deepest level, is the degree of absence of thinking is the measure for progress on the spiritual path. That's clear enough. If that's too complicated an answer, I can probably simplify it. It's how little you think shows you how far you are progressing or progressed on the spiritual path. Or how much you think shows you how little progress you have made. That's a little drastic, perhaps, but unfortunately it's true. So that's so simple, isn't it? Now, again, many of you are already able to step out of thinking. And the thoughtless state, which is presence, which is awareness, arises in your life already, here and there, spontaneously. When you look at something new, there's a moment of, before you call it anything. A new person, you meet a new person, for the first 5 seconds, the mind hasn't had time to formulate an opinion about that person. There's a moment of spaciousness. That's sometimes in that moment when people can have an intuitive perception of the other person in the first moment. But then the mind comes in, and very often what the mind says is just an expression of its conditioning. And very often it's not the other person. You're saying something about yourself rather than the other person. You're projecting, in other words. So, measure for progress on the spiritual path, in other words, is the degree of stillness in your life, your inner space, in daily life. Not how long you can sit in meditation, but more importantly, the stillness in everyday life. Can your life be interspersed with stillness, so that you no longer have the density of the mind and the emotions, but something else shining through the density, the light that is who you truly are, shines through the density. That's spiritual. That's the spiritual dimension. as I mentioned before, at some point, there was a time when I woke up one morning and I felt at peace after being a tortured individual. And a strange thing, at night, I woke up the next morning completely at peace. What's going on? And I didn't have an answer why. It took me about 2 years to realize why I was at peace. And to realize that I had to actually, I was on a kind of spiritual search. I didn't know exactly what I was searching for. I went to see monks and all kinds of strange teachers and teachings. I just wanted to check them all out. Until one monk said to me that, a Zen monk said, well, Zen is all about not thinking. Oh. And I realized I was at peace because on that day, the first morning, I wasn't thinking that much anymore. But I didn't know I wasn't thinking it much. I experienced the state of not thinking as peace. So I hadn't been able to interpret it as that was not thinking. So you experience no thought as simply a very peaceful energy arising. But it could only arise because the density of the mind wasn't there anymore. There was some thinking, of course, but not the continuous density. Very much less thinking. How much less? I don't know. A lot less. Much more than 50%. More, much more. 80 probably. So that's a spontaneous thing. Why that happened, who knows? And later, the understanding of it came 2 years later, and then gradually the teaching over the years developed. Now people ask me, well, to you it just happened. What are you expecting us to do about it? It's not happening to us spontaneously. But I know that from enormous amount of feedback I get from people that the teaching actually works for many, many people. Their life gets renewed because the old mind patterns are subsiding and the new consciousness is arising. So although it may not happen in one moment, that's fairly rare, it is for most of you, or all of you, it is the process. I call it the awakening process. When presence awakens, it's a new birth. You are newborn. So many words have been misused so much that I don't want to use them anymore. Don't say newborn.
Hi. I feel as I become more aware, my pain body becomes overactive at times when it does hit me. And I'm wondering if there's a way, do we ever dissolve entirely the pain body? Can we ever dissolve it?
Okay. Yes, I've quite a few times people have asked that question. And it's an important, valid question. But a more important point is, before I answer that question, to what extent you still identify with it or get taken over by it, because that is where the pain body continuously renews itself. To what extent does this old emotion that gets triggered from time to time, to what extent does it truly possess you and rises up into your mind and totally determines, while it is active, what you think and what you do and how you react to people and situations. To what extent does it take you over totally, or is there already a gap of awareness where you're able to know that the pain body has become activated and it is not totally using your mind and not totally controlling what you do or say? So how does that look in your life?
When I interact with people, I feel like I'm more aware of it and able to calm it, you know? But I think it's when I'm by myself that it's most penetrating, and especially after a night or a beautiful day,
Yes.
and I go to sleep feeling very at peace, and I wake up and it's just there.
Yes. Associated with certain kind of mind activity?
Not really, just waking up in the morning. Lately,
Yes.
it's just I wake up and it's boom right there. It's very penetrating. I don't know
How-
why
where
I would go to sleep
do you-
one way and
Where do
wake
you
up
feel it? In your here?
in my head.
In your head,
Yeah.
like a
Very
clamp?
strong force, pressure.
Yes. But not particular kind of thoughts arise.
Maybe I guess on some level, when I really evaluate it, probably just a cycle of, you know, lack of success in a certain area of my career or life.
Yes.
So it repeats. Am I going to start the same day and continue the day and not get anywhere with it?
Yes.
You know.
Yes. A powerful way to approach it and ultimately dissolve it is to accept, in whatever form the pain body arises, accept that that's how it is at this moment. Accept the reality of this moment. In this case, it's the inner reality of this moment. It would also apply to the outer reality of this moment. And be with it as the aware space for it. So you step back, the way of putting it is, you take a step backwards from it into yourself, and so here is the feeling, and so you go back within, so to speak, not literally of course, you step back and you become the awareness that's around it, that's always there, but you can lose consciousness of that when a strong phenomenon arises, either external or internal. A storm can absorb all your attention, but be the space for it always, and that is the most powerful way to dissolve what's there, rather than even wanting to get rid of it. Wanting to get rid of it very often strengthens it and produces a problem, a new level of problems, because then by wanting not to have it and get rid of it, you not only have the problem of having that, you have the problem of not being able to achieve to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so you can get angry about that or upset about that. But you are most powerful when you're able to bring acceptance to whatever arises at this moment. That requires a certain alertness. It is not a passive state. It is, in one sense, it is passive because it says this is what is, and that this gesture seems to be a passive gesture. It seems to be a gesture of allowing passivity, but that's not all, because without the active principle at the same time, which is an uncompromising yes to what is, which is not that, it's the sort of presence. This is what is, and this is what I accept because this is what is. That's the other polarity. The two come together in complete acceptance. It's the passive principle of allowing, and the active principle of cutting through all the nonsense of the human mind with a sort of presence, and say, so one could say it's the masculine and feminine, male and female combined. So you have, often you see images of Kuan Yin or Mary like this is the archetypal female spaciousness, space, beautiful. And then of course, or we could also say this is the female, and then this is the male, and the two have to come together, and that is true acceptance. So it's an uncompromising yes, which is the sort of presence, and it's the seemingly passive embracing what is. Practice, use that as your spiritual practice, then any phenomenon that arises, whether external or internal, in this case it's internal phenomenon, can become fuel for the fire of presence. Anything that arises. So rather than wishing it away, use it as fuel for presence.
Why is it? I'm getting that, but literally at night, feeling that and being okay with whatever I wake up of, but then it's just
you have to let go of the why, because then you start pursuing it.
Okay.
The mind, of course, does that.
I analyze it way too much.
Yes. Yeah. Because if you pursue the why, that leads you to more whys. It leads you to that why, and then you would have to go back to past lifetimes. And even that's not enough, because maybe it all started at the bottom of the sea, when before life came out of the sea, where you got eaten 1 million times by other fishes.
Thank you.
Here a related question. As I'm awakening, I'm becoming more aware of how often I'm angry, and it is getting tiresome. How do I manage the expectations of myself? Well, you need to manage the expectations, and then you need to manage the anger management and expectation management. Expectation means you beat yourself up for being unconscious, which is more unconsciousness, because the mental image of who you are says, I'm not good enough, I can't do it. You see, been at it for 25 years and I still can't do it. You can't possibly be any good if you still can't do it after 25 years. Those are thoughts that float around in your mind. And how do you feel, as I suppose that's Byron Katie would ask that, how do you feel when you believe in those thoughts? Not good. You're beating yourself up and you feel an emotion. Feel bad about myself. More ego. More conceptualized identity in your mind. Concepts in your mind about you. You derive your sense of self from that. More of the same. So let's say it's anger, and then you wake up after the anger reaction, say, I did it again, I'm no good. So you have the second egoic reaction to the first one. Anger is something that comes in many people very fast. So there may not be, unless there's already considerable presence power in you, there may not be enough presence to catch it. It takes you over before you know it, especially old reaction. And before you know it, you are talking and shouting, and you are not doing it at all. It's the pattern, it's the mind pattern, mental emotional pattern in you, which often related to what I call the pain body, which is old accumulated painful emotion, which could be anger, which could be deep, depressed sadness. Anger is a very frequent one, as the pain body energy is just waiting in people who have accumulated old anger, going back to childhood, feeling powerless. And what does a child do when the child feels powerless? It starts screaming, that's all it can do. And sometimes it works. Sometimes the parents come and say, okay, you can have the sweet, if you scream loud enough. So its powerlessness is always behind anger. And the ego pretends that there's your power there in anger. But anger arises out of a sense of powerlessness. And and there's often fear hiding underneath it. And when you are there looking at it, then you realize that at first hand within yourself there is a sense of powerlessness behind it, and the ego is pretending to be powerful when really it's in a state of fear. You can see it even with little dogs. The smallest dogs are bark the most, and whenever they're little, I've seen little dogs, whenever a big one goes past, they get angry. Because, I mean, if I were that size, I would do that too, probably. So you're a little Chihuahua, or you're a little sweet little Bichon frisé, and a Mastiff walks past, or a Rottweiler, who looks very quiet, because the Rottweiler knows its own power. It doesn't need to, it goes. And the little one goes. But with dogs we smile when we see that, because we somehow recognize that pattern. And we smile, and probably the Rottweiler has an inner smile too when he walks past. But with humans it's more difficult to smile when they go, ah! And words come streaming out of their mouth. It's more difficult to smile, but it's possible not necessarily smile, but recognize it for what it is when you see it in another. Don't equate that with who that person is. Recognize it, that the person has been taken over by that energy field. And that already is a wonderful thing. That already we could call is forgiveness in a wider sense. We don't equate unconscious behavior with who that person is. If we equate it with who that person is, that's the real meaning of judgment. Judgment is not to say to somebody, I realize that you get angry a lot, and that person then might tell you, are you judging me? No, it's a fact. If I see that you get angry a lot, that was just a fact, there's no judgment in it. But if I equate that with your essential identity of who you are an angry person, and then I always expect more anger from you, that's a judgment. Not recognizing a pattern that operates unconsciously through humans and taking that for their identity is judgment. And you can do it to yourself. So you can judge yourself for those things, and that is just as much ego as judging somebody else. You can beat yourself up and call yourself no good. And whatever else the self-talk tells you in your head, it calls you you. In many people's minds, when the mind talks to you, it says you. See, you are such and such. You see, you can't do it. Sometimes it says I. It might say I in some people, but in many it says you. Isn't that strange? You talk to yourself in your head. One part of your mind condemns the other part. When you see it, you can rise above it, and there's suddenly an awareness that comes with it. You're no longer trapped in those patterns. I would recommend particularly to become particularly alert when you know you're getting stressed, a situation is building up, and some kind of, for example, if you get anger takes over when you get stressed, could happen. When you feel a stress building up towards it, you can become very alert so that you can doesn't take you over. What you know, the anger is about to come. Or if you know certain areas of your life are more likely to make you unconscious, sometimes you know just beforehand that those are going to arise in the next minute or so, and then you can be alert, feel the entire energy field in your body, be alert with every cell of your body, then pick up the phone and talk about the financial situation with your investment advisor. So you treat those as spiritual practices and realize nothing is more important than consciousness, not the situation, it's consciousness. Some people's pain bodies consist, as I said, predominantly of anger, and in some people you can sense their semi-dormant pain body in the background, even when they are not particularly angry right now. But there are people who are waiting for the next opportunity to be angry. That's their pain body. And sometimes when you are sensitive towards other, you can feel energy fields. You can sometimes sense in other people they are waiting for an excuse to be angry. Somehow when you look into their eyes, it's already there. But it's not them. It's that which occupies their inner energy field, which is the pain body. And so they're waiting, and any excuse, and they will get angry at you or whoever it may be. So you become a grievance looking for a cause. These things do not like the light of consciousness on them. Even the pain body, your pain body, does not like to be recognized. Yes, we haven't spoken about the pain body yet. So, well, you all know what this term refers to. Accumulated emotional pain that you carry forward from your childhood, usually, perhaps also from past lifetimes. If you believe in past lifetimes, if you don't like past lifetimes, forget about it. Carried over from childhood, and it is partly personal because it's to do with your early life experience, which for everybody is somewhat painful, and for some much more than for others. And you also absorb pain body from the collective into which you're born, which could be the country or the energy field or a particular area in your country, whatever it may be. You also absorb that. So there's a personal aspect to the emotional pain that lives in you. And there's a collective aspect. And the pain body, just a very, very brief summary, the pain body is not necessarily, in most cases, always active. It has a dormant stage and an active stage. When it's dormant, you may not even know it's there. And periodically, the tendency is for the pain body to need to feed on further experience of something emotionally painful. So, because that is what corresponds to the vibrational frequency of this energetic entity, because that's what it is. Emotion is an energy form. It's consciousness. Everything is consciousness. Consciousness had taken on a particular form. An emotion is a form, a temporary form that consciousness is born into, assumes. And what childhood pain, emotional pain, usually leaves behind remnants of that particular emotion. It's not completely released. So by the time you are 18 or 20 years old, you carry a pain body. And for some humans, it's a very heavy thing. For others, it's not too bad. The pain body periodically needs to feed on the experience of emotional pain. In other words, it wants emotional pain, it needs emotional pain, and it creates emotional pain primarily in two ways. Either it creates drama with people close to you, so that you get negativity coming back at you, and then you can have the drama in relationships. Favorite place for pain body to renew itself is intimate relationships. That's the best. You get the best food in intimate relationships, and it will create drama and push the buttons. It has a borrowed intelligence. It has its own little intelligence, and it is cunning. It's a little like a gremlin kind of, and it knows your partner's weak points, and it'll touch upon them in order to provoke them into reacting with drama. And usually it works, because then when you press the correct buttons, you awaken the other person's pain body. It goes, oh, great, I'm here too. And so at that moment, you don't want to let go of it. If your therapist at that moment rang you and said, do you want to be in this drama, or do you want to be free? You would get very angry, because you wouldn't be talking, the pain body would be talking through you, and you'd be saying, get away from me, this is not about pain bodies, this is serious stuff, I don't want to hear what you have to say. Leave me alone with that nonsense, pain body. The pain body does not like to be recognized, because that means the light of consciousness is shining on it. Now, what do you do if you don't have an intimate relationship? That gets a bit more difficult. How can you renew? Oh, the pain body says, that's okay, I have the perfect solution. When I need to feed, I will rise up into your mind and I will control your thinking. And every thought will be a negative thought about yourself, about other people, about life in general, or about politics, some deeply negative thought, and then it becomes, the thought is not just one thought, it's addictive thinking, addicted to negative thinking. How my life is so awful, or this person is so awful, or this is absolutely, whether it's predominantly anger, predominantly self-pity, or whining, or shouting, whatever it is, you are trapped in a cycle of negative thinking, continuously feeds, because thought is energy too. Everything is thought, again, is a form, that every thought is a form that consciousness has taken, temporary form. It's a little entity, every thought. And that gives energy. The pain body gobbles it up. It loves your negative thinking, because the more negative thinking, the stronger it gets again. But after a while, it's had enough. It's like a big meal, then you can't eat anymore. And then suddenly it goes back to sleep, and you feel, oh, what was all that about? And sometimes if it's in a relationship, you make up. So then suddenly everything is fine again, and it's like you both wake up out of some kind of weird nightmare. But the strange thing is, this weird nightmare happens every 2 weeks, or 3, or every once a week, who knows? Maybe once a month, or every 3 months. It varies a lot. But it comes again and again. And until you begin to recognize it for what it is, then the awareness comes in. Once you recognize it, it can no longer, first of all, it can no longer use your mind. to renew itself, because you recognize it directly, say, there it is, I can feel the emotional pain. And then you may be able not to be totally controlled by it when it tries to create new drama in the relationship again, or your partner, it arises in your partner, and you can clearly see that some dark energy comes into him or her, and suddenly it's bad. If you see it for the first time after getting married, you start living together, and then for the first time you see in your partner the pain body. For many people, that is the first time when they question whether they've chosen the right person. Wow. Now, another strange thing about the pain body, it is a vibrational entity. It can sometimes attract, because there are entities floating around in this universe that we cannot see. There's a vast amount of things that we cannot see. Our senses are very limited. So there are entities whose vibrational frequency corresponds to the frequency of the pain body. A bit like what you can see, it's like in the reality that you can see with your senses. It could be compared to perhaps vermin, as we call it, rats, a rat infestation in your house, or cockroaches. So there are psychic correspondence, a bit like cockroaches or rats in the unseen realms, that can sometimes be attracted by strong pain bodies. And when that happens, the pain body so they cling to your pain body, almost merge with it, and then the pain body can be incredibly heavy and become really dangerous. And usually it happens to people who are either very, very unconscious, or people who are addicted to drugs, which lowers very much your consciousness, or alcoholics, lowers very much your consciousness, or have some deficiency in their mind. So it happens to them that their pain body attracts other entities to them, and then they could perpetrate most dreadful crimes. And often it's sometimes again, they are not always in the grip of it, but it's there, it's latent, it's waiting. And sometimes people who know these people, they say, how could he have done this? I know him, he's a nice guy. How could he have killed and dismembered 6 people? What? He was such a nice person. I was at school with him. What they didn't see was his pain body. And when his wife might have seen it. I don't know if she's still alive. So it is possible that some entities cling to your pain body, and as you bring more consciousness to it, which simply means to be aware of it, then whether or not your pain body, whether there are other entities that have come, and it might be not as bad as those entities that lead somebody to commit dreadful crimes, but little things, little bugs, unseen bugs can come in. And it is quite possible in your case, now we finally come to your question, that as you become more conscious and direct consciousness, then the pain body, it would be hard for these entities to continue to cling to your pain body, especially if they're not overpowering, which in your case, this is not, I can see that's not, you're not going to kill and dismember a few people. So these are not overpowering entities. They are little things that cling to your pain body, but if left unattended, it could get worse. But it's because you're growing in awareness, I believe that's the explanation, but I don't know if that is the explanation, but it seems to me that it is, that these things do not like the light of consciousness on them. Even the pain body, your pain body, does not like to be recognized, because it knows when you identify it, and you can feel it. You put your attention on it. It doesn't like your attention because it then cannot use your mind anymore. So if you put your attention on it, there may be things that suddenly leave. Oh, I can't stand this anymore. This person is becoming too conscious. Things leave. The pain body becomes lighter. So the pain body can even. I told a story, and I believe in New Earth, when I saw somebody for counseling session, and we had a wonderful release of this person's pain body. It was like a big chunk went, and I don't know where it went, but it went up into the air. There's similar stories in the Gospels too. It's not called pain body in the Gospels, of course. There it sounds more ominous. He was carrying an evil spirit. And then when Jesus came and said, "What is this?" the evil spirit fled and says, "Leave me alone, I can't stand your presence anymore." This is my paraphrase. So the pain body transmutation then happens, because pain body is energy, is trapped energy, that by focusing on it, the energy becomes freed. And I compare it to you could say the flame of awareness or the flame of consciousness. This energy becomes then part of your presence. It's transmuted into presence. It assumes a higher frequency. It's consciousness too, and it becomes presence. It's a bit like, you could say, if you have a piece of ice, and the ice is very hard, and you could kill somebody with a piece of ice, but when it gets transmuted, it becomes soft and fluid. And when it gets transmuted even more, it becomes vapor. You can't even see it anymore. And that's a bit like consciousness manifesting in different forms. For so-called inanimate matter would be a consciousness that is totally asleep, or almost totally asleep. And then gradually you have different degrees of awakening of consciousness in different life forms. Plant life, animal life, human life, and then awakened human life. So all you need to continue to do is to be aware of it, especially when it arises, and be aware of it when it's there in relationship. Does it use your mind still? Be very alert so that the emotion does not rise up into your mind and you start thinking negative thoughts. When this happens, immediately know what's happening. When you love your negativity, then you don't really love it, but your pain body loves it. So it's a wonderful, pain body is a great teaching, and it's a great thing it's often people with heavier pain bodies that have a more powerful incentive to awaken spiritually than people with a relatively mild pain body. However, one cannot generalize too much, but there's a tendency for people. It's like you're in a nightmare. If you're in a nightmare, your motivation to awaken is greater than if you're in a relatively pleasant dream. It's not that great, but it's okay. But if you're facing a monster, then you really want to awaken.